I think the biggest problem with selecting a coding bootcamp is just the sheer amount of choices that you have. In the book Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz, he talks about the amount of choices that we have today and the resulting anxiousness that comes from having all of these choices available to us. If you want a really easy to understand example of where this comes into play, just think about when you go to the grocery store and you're looking at the shelves and just comparing brands of peanut butter. The sheer amount of choices that you have is overwhelming, and it can make your choice kind of feel arbitrary. The same is definitely true when it comes to choosing a coding bootcamp, except it's even worse than that because the options aren't all laid out in front of you like they are at a grocery store. You can't exactly easily pick up a item or the label of a bootcamp and compare it side by side to other bootcamps. Every bootcamp is different in small and large ways, and it takes time and effort to even access the syllabus and the proper information that you need to analyze the curriculum, scheduling, etc. of a boot camp. Most boot camps, you have to enter your email just to get access to a syllabus, which isn't the worst form of resistance, but it's resistance nonetheless. This was definitely the biggest frustration that I faced when it came to me choosing a coding bootcamp to attend. It has definitely been really difficult to sort through the respective options that I have. I have a few approaches that I've developed in my time analyzing different options when it comes to coding bootcamps. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing the 5 mental models that I have developed in order to properly analyze the bootcamps that I have considered. These are certainly not hard and fast rules, but they're really solid when it comes to considering different bootcamps and kind of getting a good idea of the bootcamp that you're considering. They're roughly in order of priority. So consider the first one with the heaviest weight, and then later on, the options become a little bit more flexible. So the first rule is prioritizing the learning modality first. This is the most important point to consider, in my opinion, and it's also the easiest to kind of sort through. You need to know how you learn best and then pick a coding bootcamp that's going to offer that learning modality for you. So if that's learning from pre-recorded videos or live lectures, you need to be able to figure that out first. I would say that's probably the biggest thing to consider is how you're actually going to be learning the curriculum. Are you going to have a teacher available that you can ask questions to right in the moment, or do you not need that? Can you operate off of using pre-recorded lectures? If you can operate on using pre-recorded lectures, you have quite a few more options and frankly a lot less expensive options as well. That said, if you're like me and you highly prefer having live lectures, you're going to eliminate a ton of options right off the bat when it comes to choosing a coding bootcamp. And on the opposite side, if you don't mind using pre-recorded lectures, you can eliminate all the options that have only live lectures, and that's probably going to end up saving you a lot of money in the long run. And that's just talking about remote bootcamps. If you want to learn in person on campus, then you've also eliminated a ton of options right off of the bat, to where you have it narrowed down to just a few options probably in your area. There's less and less bootcamps now that are teaching in person. I would say there's a lot of value behind it. Personally, I've chosen to go remote, but it was certainly a close second choice for me to go to a bootcamp that offered live instruction, in-person instruction, because making that human connection has always been a huge benefit for me. Ultimately, I decided that wasn't something that was absolutely necessitous to my success, so I chose to go without it. But if that is necessary to your success, then you have a ton of options eliminated right off the bat. Similarly, do you want to go to a full-time schedule or a part-time schedule? Do you have a ton of time out of your week that you can take to study, or would you rather spend 20 to 30 hours a week chipping away at things? Similarly, do you want to go to a self-paced program where you can log on anytime and just rely on your own discipline to be able to get through the program? Or would you rather have a more structured schedule where the curriculum is sequentially moved through as time goes by, and then you're kind of held accountable to showing up to class on time, getting through the curriculum at a certain pace, etc.? Considering this option first will take you from a list of, let's say, 100 different boot camps to at least half of them, if not even less. The importance of the learning modality is huge, which is why it's the first step in this consideration. It's crucial to consider how and when you want to study so that you're working on an agreeable schedule to your personality and availability. You want to be able to get the most that you can out of boot camp while also being able to take care of your obligations in life, while also optimizing your experience while in the boot camp. The second rule is to sort through the reviews methodically for the boot camp you're considering. There's a big issue that I've found in my experience with trying to find reviews to bootcamps online. The problem is twofold. First of all, it's hard to find a website that really has all the information you need to make a decision based off of this. Most websites have a lot of coding bootcamp reviews available, but not any of them that I've found at least has a comprehensive list of all of the potential options that you could pick. That's not really to be expected either, because there's so many bootcamps popping up and shutting down on a weekly basis that it would be really, really difficult to be able to compile all of this information and be able to sort it methodically in a reliable and quick iterative basis. So I don't blame them, but it just kind of contributes to the nature of being able to find reliable reviews in general. Course Report has been one of my most reliable sources for finding this information, so you might find that useful if you look into it. But even when I use that site, I come to my second issue with review sites, which is confirming the validity of the reviews themselves. I haven't found a bootcamp that really has a good way of confirming that the people reviewing it have absolutely gone to the bootcamp. So like verifying purchasers, verifying attendees like they do on like Amazon products, for example. But that's a problem. And the other thing is that most bootcamps have a dropout rate of about 20%. So about 1 out of every 5 people that attend a coding bootcamp end up not finishing, which is fine. But all of those people, or most of those people that end up dropping out, are going to have a less than great thing to say about the bootcamp experience, even if it just wasn't a good fit for them, even if they weren't able to get through the curriculum, despite the fact that the curriculum was of high quality. Everybody that had a bad experience is going to be leaving a review for the bootcamp. Not everyone that had a good experience is going to be leaving a review for the bootcamp. There's still plenty of positive reviews that you can find, but you'll find even the highest rated bootcamps like General Assembly, Flatiron, etc., have a ton of low reviews. It's not uncommon for the highest rated reviews on a lot of these websites to be just over 4 stars on a rating. So it's kind of hard to fully determine whether or not the ratio of positive to negative reviews is a true representation of the bootcamp experience. So the best way to get some real insight into the experience that people are having at this bootcamp that you're considering is to go on LinkedIn and actually reach out to graduates in general. Then just cold email them or cold message them on LinkedIn to try to get their experience and get a few pieces of advice or things they liked, things they didn't like so much, so that you can properly evaluate your option. This was a big step that I used with being able to pick my bootcamp specifically, and I got a ton of insight and a lot of tips and tricks for getting through the process in general. So not only can it be a positive in terms of picking a bootcamp, but also in terms of prepping for your bootcamp as well. The next step in the process is finding reliable data. You want to know what the numbers are behind the bootcamp. This includes numbers like graduation rates, placement rates, the total amount of alumni. These are all important things to consider when it comes to choosing a coding bootcamp. These are usually numbers that you can find either by calling the coding bootcamp and talking to an advisor, or by just going to the website and being able to find that online. A lot of the times these things are advertised on the coding bootcamp websites, especially if these numbers are particularly high. This is a great place to start, but it's not perfect. At times, these numbers may or may not be fudged a little bit, so all of these need to be taken with a huge grain of salt. It's a good place to start, though. Another great way to get verification of the quality of school that you're going to is to go the LinkedIn route that I mentioned in the previous step. I would say this is probably one of the most important steps when it comes to vetting the quality of your coding bootcamp, because getting feedback from real humans is what's going to help you out the most. Step number 4 is to compare pricing of the bootcamp very carefully. It's important to keep budget in mind when it comes to attending a coding bootcamp. There are some online coding bootcamps that are fairly affordable. They start at just a few $100 to a few $1,000s. Mid-tier bootcamps are going to run roughly $8,000 to $12,000, and then the upper tier bootcamps are going to be anything above that, essentially. $13,000 to $20,000 or sometimes more for a coding bootcamp. When you're considering price for a coding bootcamp, I would generally put myself in one of those 3 tiers when it comes to the budget that you can afford. Doing this up front is going to eliminate a bunch of options that I would still probably consider with the first 3 steps that we've talked about, but considering this as well is going to eliminate a lot of them. Once you have your respective bootcamps sorted by pricing tiers, it's going to be a little bit easier to investigate the pros and cons of each coding bootcamp. So what I would do is organize my options into these respective pricing tiers and then go to step 1 and kind of figure out what the different options and curriculum is involved in each, compare those, and then make a decision based off of that. But just staying aware of where the pricing is going to be roughly. The thing that you have to prioritize over everything else when it comes to coding bootcamp is your job readiness after you graduate. It doesn't matter if you only paid $2,000 for a coding bootcamp. If you're not job ready by the time you're done, you're going to spend a bunch more time spinning your wheels trying to get your career off the ground, when if you had just spent the additional money going to a much higher quality coding bootcamp, you could have been graduated and employed after 6 to maybe 9 months. If you're on year number 2, trying to self-teach and land that first job, after your coding bootcamp, you're not in a good place, and you're much farther behind financially than you would have been if you had just spent the money up front, graduated, and gotten employed in a more reliable way. For this reason, it's really important not to overweigh the importance of pricing when it comes to picking your bootcamp. Consider pricing carefully, but don't let it be the only deciding factor or the primary deciding factor. And if affordability is a problem right now, I would personally argue that time spent not being an engineer is better before coding bootcamp than it is after coding bootcamp. This is because if you wait, you can self-study while you're earning money to be able to afford the more expensive bootcamp. Then when you get into the higher quality expensive bootcamp, you are able to study with a firmer foundation, and then you're going to be able to build projects and use the mentorship that you have through the coding bootcamp in order to help yourself be more qualified by the time the 6 months is up. If you just go to a cheap coding bootcamp up front and then have to spend time afterwards playing catch up and trying to get better at mock interviews, etc., you're going to be in a much weaker position when it comes to trying to get into your position, and you're going to create more desperation for yourself, which is the last thing that we want. You want to use the time after bootcamp doing as much interviewing and job searching as possible instead of spending all of your time trying to play catch up learning the fundamentals. You're going to be able to use the resources through the mentorship programs or the career services programs that your bootcamp offers to the fullest extent, which is in getting you a job, not in relearning patchy information that you didn't have up front, which kind of gives us a natural segue into the last step for vetting the quality of the bootcamp: vetting the mentorship quality. Look, unless you're a rare exception and you get a job before bootcamp even ends, you're going to need to spend time and effort learning how to build your resume, how to build your LinkedIn, how to do mock interviews, and actually sit down and be ready for the interview process. This is why vetting the mentorship quality is so important. You can do this a few ways. First, I consult online reviews about whether or not they include talking about career services, mentorship, etc. Just investigate the verbiage of the reviews that you see online to see if these things are even brought up in a positive or negative light, or if they're not brought up at all. Honestly, absence of them will be your best indicator as to whether or not A, they have a mentorship program in the first place, but B, if it has any real effect. In most solid, positive testimonials, you'll see people talking about their relationship with their career services coach, their support in finding a job, things like that. You hear a lot more about people missing out on the guidance after learning than not actually learning the curriculum itself. That's the bigger problem. Looking at placement rates for the bootcamp is also a kind of secondary indicator of the quality of mentorship. Most bootcamps that have a high placement rate are going to have at least some kind of mentorship help, which will lead to that higher placement rate. And that's not it's not a one-to-one relationship, but it will give you at least an indicator as to what the support is like going from learning to earning as a developer. Another thing to do to vet this quality is to make sure when you're talking to people on LinkedIn that you ask them about their mentorship experience as well. Make that a big point of the experience itself, and you'll get a lot of insight from that. Lastly, see if you can get a call with a mentor or career services person from this specific bootcamp. They're going to be a little bit biased, obviously, in favor of their program, but they'll also be able to give you the most clear picture of what the process looks like, what the curriculum for career services specifically is like, requirements, things you're expected to do, and then what you can actually expect in terms of outcomes. So that can be a really good resource to go to as well. Mentorship is not the be-all, end-all of the bootcamp experience. I say this because you can outsource it. If it isn't provided as a part of your bootcamp, for a couple $100 a month, you can hire an online mentor to kind of help you walk through the job acquisition process and to do mock interviews with you, etc. So it's not something that is absolutely crucial to the bootcamp experience. But I would argue that any bootcamp with a high placement rate is going to be at least partially due to the quality of their career support. All of these factors meshed together is going to make your decision-making process a lot easier and quicker when it comes to choosing a coding bootcamp that you want to go to. I hope this helped, and I'll see you again soon. Peace.